Welcome to Introducing the World's First Automated Container Backup and Recovery, brought to you by Bacula Systems. I would like to introduce today's first presenter, Frank Barker. Frank, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Charlene, and welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Frank Barker, and I have the honor to be the CEO of Bacula Systems. I'll be joined today by one of our co-founders, Arno Lehmann, from our technical team. Our topic today is container backup, and one of our recent announcements concerning the world's first automated container backup and recovery solution. I understand this title is a little controversial, particularly as Bacula Systems has been backing up containers for some years now, and at least two of our competitors have followed us into the container backup space. The key word here is automated. You will hear as we go through the seminar how we have used the internals of Docker to produce a scalable solution, rather than just put a file daemon or an agent on every container as others are doing and back it up as if it was a standalone server. So we make no apologies for claiming to be the first, because we are. So what are we covering today? Well, the world of Bacula Systems is focused on IT departments and DevOps teams. And containers are becoming increasingly prevalent in these departments. We're going to talk about the best way to manage the backup and recovery of those containers. We're going to talk about the benefits, and we'll also foreshadow in this webinar some upcoming offerings in the container and orchestration space that we'll be announcing later this year. So why is Docker so popular? I think everyone in this call is aware that a container is a way to package an application with all its dependencies and ship it out or use it as one package. And that Docker is the de facto standard to make it easier to create, deploy, and run applications using containers. I don't think there's any specific news here. But what is the issue underneath all of this? Well, the issue is quite simple. As containers become more ubiquitous, the issues of not having a good backup and restore strategy are growing. Where we are going here is that containers are fundamentally challenging virtual machines, and because of the flexibility, speed, and cost advantages of containers, they will displace and replace many virtual machines. We expect them to become pervasive, i.e. they'll be more noticeable by their absence in a data center than by their presence. Just like today, in any data center, you'd be surprised not to find virtual machines in the data center. Containers are going exactly the same way. So data centers and DevOps teams need a good solution in this space. So backing up containers is a big deal, especially for persistent data, and will become a bigger deal in the future. To put all this in some context, let me spend a few minutes on what Bacula is. So Bacula is used by data centers worldwide as a core and trusted part of their backup strategy. In fact, in many cases, we are the backup strategy. It's a fully featured product. It covers all the options of cloud, physical, virtual, and now Docker, and all the hybrid options in between. It does all this through a single platform, which is scalable from a few machines to many thousands of machines. It's also cost-effective from a few machines to many thousands of machines. It's a very flexible and powerful product, and you can tell this by the companies who use it. So let's look at a few names here you might recognize. You will find Bacula in organizations who have lots of data, like Sky or Turner Studios, who use us for the backup and restore of broadcast programs, which have huge amounts of data. You will also find us in organizations with tight budgets, like universities. You'll find us in companies that have both lots of data and tight budgets. Think of MSPs here, managed service providers like Velocity, LocalWeb, the largest one in Latin America, or Rackspace. You'll also find us in smaller companies like Outfittery, who like us for our cost effectiveness, flexibility, and technology. So the way our product is architected gives an insight into its popularity. On the left-hand side of this slide, you will see that we have many user interfaces. which can be mixed and matched within an organization to the user's needs. Our flagship graphical user interface, B-Web Management Suite, a REST API for automation, command line and scripting for those who prefer that. We have many options on user interface. On the right-hand side of the slide, we also have many options for storage. So again, you can mix and match. We have tapes, auto changers, virtual tape libraries, disks, disk arrays, the cloud in all its flavors, appliances, deduplicating storage devices. You name it, we cover all the storage options you could possibly have. In this middle box, you see some of the key solution areas where we've created specific technologies. In the hypervisor first line here, you'll see KVM, Red Hat, VMware, Xen, Proxmox, and we also have added Docker here. We have technologies that bring speed and flexibility to the data center, like NetApp, accelerators, MDMP, SAN shared storage. And we have a number of solutions with single item restores, like VMware Exchange and MDMP. And of course, we cover the Microsoft world. Different backup products for different needs. Okay? We have automated client-initiated backups, bare metal recovery, data compression, CDP. We have tools for a number of databases, SAP HANA, Oracle, MySQL, a whole range. It's an incredibly wide capability, which enables us to do the job very cost effectively for most organizations. So in summary, if you have a lot of data or a limited budget or both, you should be talking to us if you aren't already. One of the reasons we are so popular, in addition to, of course, to our ability to do the job, which is pretty fundamental, is that we don't charge by data volume, which we would position as an old world method coming from a time where disks would spin and data volume really was a driver of complexity. Those days are long gone. So I think I've probably said enough about Bacula. Let's get back to Docker. So let me hand over now to Arno.
So what I'm going to talk about is a bit of how we work with Docker and why in particular Docker containers may need backup and may need backup in a fairly manageable way, which is scalable and easily usable. And one of the key considerations there is that in the best of all worlds, containers themselves might not be needing any backup at all. Simply because they are prepared systems created from scratch, from templates, and should not contain any valuable data outside of their actual lifetime. While that is the theory, in practice it's not always that easy. So sometimes we find infrastructure containers which are carefully handcrafted and contain their own data. Sometimes we find persistent storage that is only accessible in a reasonable way through a container. And in general, the key problem is that while for the largest estate of all containers, a non-backup solution may be working, there will always be a few cases where backup and recovery capabilities are strictly required. And given that fact, of course, we end up with the problem that we need to do this in a very reasonable way, simple way, reliable way, which of course means we need to be able to back up everything without restrictions and provide the abilities to tune backup processes and restores as needed. So that is the scenario we're working in. This is the goal that we do with a particular considerations about how to manage containers, how to enable a backup administrator who may not know about the actual infrastructure at that container level to still do a good job providing restorability and the needed capabilities to their users. So we find we have good reasons to be able to back up containers, and we have an approach here, which we do with one of our modules, with our Docker plugin, which is integrating the Bacula file daemon, our agent, with the Docker API. It does not need any particular software installed inside a container to be backed up, which is one of the reasons for its scalability, of course. This approach, where we are handling individual containers, is in fact to be considered part of a road towards full orchestration integration, which we're currently working on. We will announce that sometime in the near future. And the point that we consider container backups, while important, as becoming more and more basic requirement of reasonable IT environments, made us offer that Docker container solution with any Bacula Enterprise subscription above a certain level without any additional cost. Of course, that will also allow us to learn how it's used, what we need to add on top of that, what we need to observe, and essentially we are trying to learn from our users as well, as usual. And since doing that is also my job in Bacula Systems, I'm kind of very eager to see those container modules deployed and used more widely in the near future. So we have that integration with the Docker system, where we can create container image backups, including all the different layers that make up a single container image, independent of if they are read-only or writable layers. We can back up all of them in one go. We create essentially a template or an image of a complete container, and that can be used to create a new container from that backup image when needed. We can also do some other things with it, not limiting our users to be able to restore their containers into the same Docker infrastructure they backed it up from. We provide all the needed facilities to, in the worst case, even manage things manually from our backups. The fact that we do not need to install our agent or any software of ours inside a container implies that we back them up through the Docker infrastructure, which means we are backing them up from the common image repository where that's referenced, and accordingly can make good use of some other facilities, which I will be mentioning a bit later. And we do all that through the regular Docker APIs, through the Docker services, which allows us to do all the things that Docker itself can do with its containers. We can put them into a consistent state. We can access them through the Docker API and essentially get all the functionality at the storage level that is made use of by Docker itself. One of the key problems, of course, is the efficiency here. We achieve part of that. I would say that it's the internal part by being able to access the container as a whole. We do not need to walk through its file system inside, potentially many file systems, and find what is in there. In particular, there's no huge amount of file stat calls, so we just need a very limited amount of resources on the Docker infrastructure, much less than a standard file backup would need from inside a container. In particularly offloading quite a bit of work from underlying file systems that may be used, that can be limiting in many different ways. We try to avoid that as much as possible. We do not necessarily create a snapshot of the underlying storage systems. We rely on the Docker infrastructure to provide us with usable data, consistent data. For that purpose, we can perform the backups of containers in any state a container might be in, running container or stopped container. We try to make use of what Docker does. We make implicit use of the underlying storage technology, which gives us all the flexibility we need while not introducing any potential new bottlenecks in the whole system. And of course, to achieve the next part of, or the next level of efficiency, where the backup administrator needs to control what is actually backed up and at what time, in which state, we report about that. Whenever our module backs up a container, it will create a corresponding log message, which allows to very easily and in a very simply automated way to verify that everything that needs to be backed up is really backed up in the proper state. So Once we have our backups in a way that can be used to represent a complete container, it's time to consider how to recover those backups to new containers. That, of course, is one of the options. When restoring, we can send the complete backup to the Docker services and create a complete new container from that image in that case. It's also possible to automatically start that container right after the restore, which can be a very important part in a disaster recovery strategy where, in particularly important infrastructure containers, the downtime needs to be minimized as much as possible. This can be done directly through the Bacula interfaces or through the Bacula user interface. It's also possible to restore the backup that we did to the image level, either directly imported into Docker or even just restored into the local file system, which then allows the backup administrator or the container administrator to manage that image manually in whatever way is needed. So this is one part of the flexibility that we always try to achieve with our modules, with our plugins, because we, of course, want to provide a good, usable, reliable, and long-term scalable solution. But we are also aware that there are situations and times when you need to be able to work on things yourself, potentially with the proper application experts, administrators, other support, consultants, whatever, and cannot rely on the Bacula functionality itself. We adhere to this standard with the containers as well. You can restore them so they are just appearing as image files in the regular file system to be used as needed. So now that we do have our backups and the capabilities to restore them, it becomes interesting to look at how to use them. And one of the most widely typical uses is in any sort of DevOps environments where things are developing very dynamically, probably, if I wanted to use a very traditional word, in a hardly managed way, kind of chaotic, where it's not always possible to quickly identify what needs to be backed up, where the data is, and in particular not be able to rely on that information to be static for a long time. So we need a flexible way. We also need to be able to support all the different technology used in those dynamically developing environments, which means today, of course, containers, where we focus on Docker now. It also means, of course, being able to work with virtualization systems, with hypervisors of all flavors, potentially changing hypervisor systems, all of that with an application that allows you to integrate all the different technologies without having to deploy new backup solutions or to learn completely new approaches. We try to use that in a way that is very simple. We try to cover everything that is used. We try to be able to back up every system that is in the world in actual use from one platform with the same basic approach from the backup administrator's point of view. And I think we are all kind of proud that today we can provide that same flexibility, including containerized or Docker containerized applications and systems in the same way, preventing, well, more cases of vendor lock-in simply because our solution is designed to be pretty open as much as possible. So we have a solution that can work in many different environments, combining, for example, hypervisor systems, container systems, physical systems, and thus supporting organizations that are moving their applications, their services from one of those technologies to another one without creating big breaks in their operational procedures. And of course, we believe that to be able to use only one solution is a very important part of that. Bacula does work with physical, virtual, and even hosted cloudified systems in the same way. The same thing, and Frank mentioned that before, applies to our storage targets. You can freely combine all the different data sources that we can handle with different data targets for the backup storage. So we trust that we have something pretty flexible, very reliable, and giving even dynamically changing environments and organizations all the tools they need. So the tools that you get in particular with Bacula and its container backups include, of course, the plain and very traditional and very reliable console applications and console interfaces. We have a screenshot here of a bconsole session, which just shows us what we are seeing when we're doing a container backup. Everything looks like plain files, which is just what we want with our approach that is trying to be application agnostic as much as possible. So this is something that an experienced Bacula user or even a new Bacula user who tries to focus on the most essential interfaces initially can easily understand and use. That gives you a quick insight into what you're having and how those things look like with our tools. We have a different view here for the probably those administrators or users who are looking for a slightly more user-friendly way. We have our web interfaces. In this case, we have a screenshot of the bweb product, in particular the configuration of the file set using the Docker plugin. And this shows actually some pretty important aspects here. We can just use the Docker plugin, and it will back up every container it finds on the host it's running on. But of course, that would not always be the best solution. And this is one part towards automation that is very important, is that we can, by using very simple matching processes, we can define which containers to back up. All of those text fields for including and excluding things, they accept lists of regular expression, which allows to very simply determine, for example, to not back up all the test containers, but definitely back up all the database containers. Things like that are easily understandable, pretty simple to configure with the graphical interface, like in this case, or even in the traditional way with a text configuration file. We have the needed tools to control how the actual backup will be done, if the container during the backup will be paused to ensure consistent contents, or if we can leave it running during the backup. All of that is available with a few mouse clicks and allows to build solutions that are scalable, do not need much maintenance, and get the job done. So we have that feature list that I try to give here. We do those image-based backups of any Docker container. We do this with the Docker system. We rely on Docker functionality, which means we are trying to not lock you into the Bacula solution. What gets backed up is Docker usable data. We have the ability to restore single images or complete backups as needed. We can restore those containers that were backed up as new Docker system images, or to create a completely new container out of them, which can be automatically started when it's restored. And of course, and I mentioned that, we have the ability to restore the backed up container images to an alternate directory on an accessible file system, so they can be used in ways that we could not foresee or that may be needed for particular recovery processes or for forensic processes in some cases. All of that is part of our regular Docker module, and that implies that we may make use of some other things. Simply because we try to be able, with our Bacula software, to combine features as needed. And one of those features that is important, in particular when thinking about Docker images or Docker containers, is that they are not easily backed up using an incremental approach. So essentially, a container will always be a complete container image or container backup archive. And that can, at cases, lead to a severe waste of space. We can prevent that, even if the Docker infrastructure itself has no facilities to do that, by using deduplication technologies. The deduplication technology that we are using natively is what we call global endpoint deduplication, which can start doing the work right at the client during the backup time, and accordingly not only save storage capacity, but also save lots of network bandwidth. That is one way to do things. In that case, you would essentially need the storage capacity only at the level that you would be needing it for very, very efficiently configured incremental backups, which is a very, very good situation to enable you to just back up everything you find without having to consider that many of your containers may be built from the same building blocks, from the same underlying base images or container archives, and you would not be wasting space like that. Every single block would only be saved once, and you would still have complete backups of all the containers involved, eventually even saving quite a bit of underlying resources at the network and storage level. We can do different deduplication approaches using our aligned volume plugin, which is essentially just ensuring that the Bacula data that gets written to the final storage systems can be efficiently deduplicated, because we split out all the important and for us metadata that is different between backups and jobs and files, and feed the deduplicating storage system with more or less plain original data. That is a feature that is particularly useful if you're using for storage or for backup storage purposes file systems like ZFS, which do very efficient deduplication built in, and you don't want to start doing the deduplication on the client side. In that case, we have a very nice solution that fits into those environments as well. And of course, and I mentioned that, we consider the Docker plugin as one very important step towards something slightly bigger, and that would be a complete Kubernetes integration, where we will be providing a solution that works at the orchestration level and not at the level of certain containers, which will simplify some deployments which may not be applicable to others, but it will provide Kubernetes users in particular with backup and restore capabilities that happen at the at the level they are wanting to work with their systems. And as we have been mentioning before, we try to make use of all the underlying capabilities like container backups in the future, orchestration systems, storage systems that are already in place from one platform, which is one of the key elements of the Bacula system solution, that Bacula Enterprise Edition can do just that. As we are talking about a single platform, a single application which supports all those technologies, that means you are using the same processes and procedures all over the place, which simplifies the administrative work a lot and can also simplify a lot of the operational processes. We also do not charge by data volume, which means we prefer people backing up slightly more than they probably strictly have to, but simplifying their lives without having to pay for that simplification. That is one of the very important points if you're trying to build a scalable solution where there will be no big surprises in terms of data volume related costs that can start accruing over time. And of course, having a solution that is really flexible and provides capabilities to back up from data sources you may not even think at this time, to storage targets that are probably not in use but may become interesting from one solution, is a very, very good step towards simplifying change management and developing IT environments in general. We believe we have a solution which is very good with that, and I would claim that our Docker container module is a very good demonstration of just that process of our improvements towards what is really needed in the wild. So at this time, I would conclude my remarks about our new product, our Docker module, and you have the chance to ask questions. We will try to answer them as well as we can. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, Arno and Frank. So we are now transitioning into our Q&A session. As a reminder, please navigate to the bottom of Zoom and open the Q&A pod to type in your question and send it in. All right, our first question is, when will Bacula be releasing its Kubernetes module?
So whenever you get a question like this, you know, what's behind this question? Okay, so our plan is to release the product to existing customers in September and then to build it into our next product release. So we're quite a long way down the path of development in Q&A. Looks really good, the product looks really good. So that'll be when we take it out to the market. Our plan is also to provide it free of charge to all the existing Bacula systems, Bacula Enterprise customers at a certain level of subscription and above. And our idea here is that this is something I think that most organizations who have got large numbers of servers will need. And therefore we'll provide it free of charge, just another one of those added value things you get from Bacula systems. So look out for the product hitting the market, probably the next product released after September, but it'll be going into the product in September.
Great. We have another question here. How much does the Docker module of Bacula Systems cost? Can I purchase it now?
Okay, so let me take that one as well, Arno. So it will be free of charge, as I said. What we want to do is to get this out to data centers, managed service providers, organizations who have got a fairly large number of servers, because we think that's where the target market for this will be first of all. And we'll provide it to those organizations. If you're an existing customer today, then you'll get it free of charge. If you're not an existing customer today, I suggest you contact your Bacula Systems sales representative, ask for a quote, start the implementation now, because when it comes round to September, you can also have it free of charge. So I hope that answers the question.
Great. Next question. What is it specifically that other backup solutions cannot do that Bacula can?
Well, let me take first crack at this, Arno, and then I'll hand over to you if you've got anything to add. Okay. So
yeah, sure.
I guess the first thing you have to say is it depends where you're coming from. I think the first reason that Bacula Systems gets chosen, and I would point out they were almost always in a replacement market, is that the customers are coming to us because they see that we can do the job that their existing vendors struggle to do. So I'd say people who are big users of, I don't know, IBM, EMC, Veritas, Veeam, Commvault, they're the typical people we're replacing. So they come to us because their existing solution doesn't give them what they need. So we have the ability to do the job. We've got the broadest range of binaries available. You can see with Docker, we've got a very interesting solution. We can technically do the job, I would say, is the first reason. Yeah. The second reason is the quality of our support. So our support organization continuously gets feedback, positive feedback, pundits from our customers about the quality of the organization and the people in it, and the fact that rather than just upgrade to the next version, which is fairly typical of the response of some of the larger organizations, it's actionable answers that you get from Bacula Systems. So I'd say the quality of our support, the way we own the customer issues, the way we work with the customers to resolve those issues is the second reason. And the third reason is that we have a much more interesting commercial model, I would say a more modern commercial model than anyone else in the marketplace today. Now, an example of that is Docker is free. An example of that is our CDP solution is free. An example of that is we don't charge by data volume. So you don't have these inherent charges as in a world of cloud and hybrid environments where data volume is a very transitory thing. You don't have a situation where you're being charged for data volume. And you really are, as our marketing team would say, free to grow. And you're not going to get hit with a data volume charge from Bacula Systems. So we have, I'd say, the three reasons are product, support, and our commercial approach, contracts, and how we price our products. Arno, you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, I think I can add some more technical things here. And there are in particular two of them, I think, that are most worthy to be pointed out. One is that we support essentially, or let's say we at this time, as we are pretty young with those modules now, we try to support all the platforms that the Docker services can run on with our backup solution, with our module, which is easy for us because we already cover those platforms with our plain file daemon. And that means you're not limited to a very limited list of supported, let's call them proxy machines to back up your Docker containers. We support the infrastructure and the implementations that are already in place. The second thing is, and that is related to that first one, is that we don't require specific software of ours in the containers to be backed up. We can back up through the Docker infrastructure, and we don't pretend to claim that just being able to install our agent inside a container is a container backup solution. Admittedly, there may be cases where just that may be the best solution, but that is not all we're doing. We're doing both ways. So we provide the complete range of functionality with one solution here in this case. I think that should answer the technical questions.
Thank you.
At least.
All right, we have another question here. Is containerization replacing the existing virtualization technologies? And then a second part, is backing up virtual machines going away in the future?
I think that's probably a little too extreme. I think the history of our industry is that new technologies seldom kill the older technologies. There's a long period of coexistence. I mean, mainframes are still very much a business for IBM, for example, even though they've been around for probably, 40, 50 years. So let's go back a little bit here. So what have we got? We have virtualization out there with VMware being the market leader, and we have a number of other virtualization hypervisors out there, KVM, Red Hat, a number of others. This is going to continue as an important marketplace for the future. And every backup and restore vendor needs to have the ability to back up and restore virtualization VM machines and all the hypervisors that are out there. I would say an increasing number of hypervisors. In the past, it's typically been VMware who've been the market gorilla, but now, of course, that's no longer the case, and many others are in there. So virtual machines are not going to go away. But what we are seeing is the rise of containers, which are like virtual machines in many ways, but they're faster, lighter, easier to spin up. Maybe a little bit, people might think of them as transitory, but the reality is they're not as transitory as people think. I remember when virtualization first hit the marketplace, people thought virtualization would be used for relatively transitory applications. And of course, that's not the case. And containers are just following in the footsteps of that. So I think we'll see containers rise and rise and rise alongside virtual machines. There will be cases when people will choose to use a container rather than a virtual machine for its many advantages. But I don't think that one will replace the other in a like-for-like environment in a data center for some years to come. But the trend is very clear. Yeah, it's very clear. You just need to look at the growth of the virtualization hypervisor vendors and see whether revenues are growing in the hypervisor virtual machine part of their revenue. And you can see this market is maturing. And the upcome of containers is playing a very large part in that as the container market takes off more and more. So I hope that answers the question. I don't think it's a like for like, one will kill the other. I think there's going to be a long period of coexistence, but it's very clear where the new technology is and what the big advantages are of containers over virtual machines.
Okay. So I see no more questions in the Q&A pod. So Arno and Frank, do you have any other closing remarks?
Well, let me just say thank you to everybody for joining us today. I hope we've given you some insight into Bacula systems and what we're doing in Docker and containers. I'd also like to thank Arno for covering the main parts of the presentation. A big thank you to all of you for joining us today. And I hope you will consider Bacula systems as part of your IT infrastructure, either for containers or virtual machines or any of the wide range of capability we have. You know how to get hold of us. It's easy through our website. Contact us or feel free to give us a call. So thank you, everyone, and I wish everyone a good morning or a good afternoon and goodbye from Arno and from me. Bye.
Goodbye from me as well. Thanks for joining us.